When he had come to Beijing from Rome in 1660, Verbius had brought the knowledge of Kepler and Galileo with him. The emperor had Verbius appointed to the board of astronomers. He revolutionized Chinese astronomy. A new observatory was built, and the Westerner began to study the stars for the Son of Heaven. The elevation of Verbius was a dramatic break from the Chinese custom. The intellectual curiosity of Kangxi allowed a point of outside light into the forbidden city, and the emperor was an ardent pupil. Perhaps the emperor had elevated outsiders like the Jesuit priest Verbius because he was an outsider himself, a Manchu. In 1644, his family had come at the head of a marauding army from beyond the Great Wall of China. In a matter of days, the ancient and enfeebled Ming dynasty had fallen to the men from the north. The Manchus were skilled horsemen, they were good with arrows, but they were not intellectuals. Fools, said one Han Chinese official, without grace or character. Kangxi, the Manchu emperor of the new Qing dynasty, wanted to change all that. He immersed himself in ancient Chinese history. He developed the mind of a scholar, not a soldier. Not that he could afford to do without soldiers. There were many Chinese who would never accept their new masters, and rebellion was a constant threat in the early years of Kangxi's reign. Kangxi's first problem had been the power of the eunuchs. They developed a taste for politics during the Ming dynasty, and nothing seemed to get done without bribing them. Kangxi turned them into servants again. All of the emperor's eunuchs were volunteers. All had been given a last chance to change their minds when the knife came out. Kangxi said that they babbled like babies, but they did guarantee the chastity of his women. The eunuchs who looked after them also stood to benefit if their concubine was chosen. The emperor made his choice after the evening meal. Kangxi always dined alone, and he was always faced with a vast array of food, most of which went untouched. There was lotus root, dragon-headed prawns, fragrant rices, and dried fruits, swallows' nests and braised bear paw, and the palace dish of chicken and broth cooked with wood-ear mushroom. Now it was time to choose his concubine for the night, and the time for the eunuchs to try to direct his hand. Each stick represented a concubine, which the eunuchs carefully arranged to help him make the right choice, choose their concubine. If the emperor chose their mistress, they stood to benefit. But with scores of concubines and hundreds of eunuchs vying for his attention, Kangxi had seen every trick. Kangxi impregnated 30 of his concubines. They bore him a total of 56 children. Motherhood for the successful concubine involved a considerable rise in status. She was relieved of all household duties to become a lady of leisure. This was especially true when taking care of a child like Ying Ren, the heir apparent. The little child was frequently sick in his infancy. Everything was devoted to his survival. For 10 years he struggled with illness, and then Ying Ren, meaning blessed offspring, received an education in the ancient Confucian tradition of the earlier Ming dynasty. The emperor's favorite child was being groomed for power.
I had the wisest handling scholars to instruct him in morality. He studied the book of history and was instructed in the principles of government. Ying Ren I named as heir apparent.
治世仁人，无求生以害人，有杀生以成仁。
30 years later, the father would be ashamed of his son. And Kangxi's reign, so promising at first, was to sour as the seasons passed. For 60 winters, Kangxi had been emperor in the Forbidden City. It had been a time of prosperity, but there was no joy now. The emperor's 60th winter was the most traumatic of his reign. The problem was Ying Ren, his favorite son. It had started with rumors and court intrigue. It soon became an unquestionable fact.
大人呢？我送铁板，送铁板，摇板。
By way of a secret intelligence network, the emperor had discovered that his son was unfit to rule. In the winter of 1722, a special message arrived at the gates of the Forbidden City. It contained the worst news yet. Kangxi already knew that his son was cruel and tyrannical. He also knew that he had purchased young boys from the south for his sexual pleasure, and that he had embezzled state funds and stolen tribute meant for his father. The Emperor Kangxi died on the 20th of December, 1722. An empire had to be informed, and the mandate of heaven was passed on. In his last days, Kangxi had acted by disinheriting his treacherous son. Out of the confusion emerged Young Zhen as his successor. Young Zhen stabilized the dynasty, and 13 years later was duly succeeded by his heir, who ascended the throne as Qin Long, lasting eminence. This time the succession was smooth.